So Claire, have you heard about the Ramageddon going on with the prices of memory?
I have. I actually was warning about this memory inflation that we were going to experience all the way back in December, and it's crazy to see it actually play out.
I think the funniest thing is thinking that regular people are going to first experience the AI boom, not by drinking your water bottle, but at the price of an Xbox.
I know, I think consumers are now experiencing the AI supply chain crunch that we've been seeing play out so much in the spaces that we're investing in. I think to put it into perspective, you have laptop prices rising now. The
PlayStation prices are
Yep.
going up.
iPads, HomePods, Apple TVs, those are also going to go up. Even the budget Neo laptop, which I think they marketed as the device that used less RAM, that's going up from $599 to now $699. And then for something high-end like a MacBook Pro, that's going from $1,700 to now about $2,000.
I mean, that's a big price jump. Is this memflation? Is the memory from my MacBook going into an AI data center?
Yeah. How I've explained it to people is actually with a fun little steakhouse analogy.
Oh, okay.
If you think about memory players, there's a couple of them. There's Samsung, SK Hynix, Micron. These are providers that can also build something called high bandwidth memory, which is what AI needs a lot of. But you also have players like SanDisk, which we know well, that provides regular memory. For all of these memory players, they right now have limited capacity to churn out things. So think of it like they're running a steakhouse. They have a couple burners. But right now what they're seeing is the opportunity to essentially switch from selling these low margin burgers to very expensive $200 dry age ribeyes. And so that's the high bandwidth memory that AI requires. It's much more expensive, but since there's so much demand coming from these AI data centers, they're obviously going to focus much more on building that out as opposed to, churning out RAMs.
Makes sense. Why flip burgers when you can sell steaks?
We're back with another big week. Meta has developed a model to read your brain without an implant or surgery. The biggest AI labs are racing into scientific discovery. And then we sit down with Ion Stoica, the Berkeley professor behind Databricks, Anyscale, and Apache Spark, to get into Arena, which is the scoreboard that the whole AI industry now runs on. Then we close with some deals. Let's get into it. Josh, did you hear that Meta is trying to read our minds now?
I feel like most people think that Meta's been reading our minds for a really long time, right? Like when you get an Instagram ad, everyone thinks that Meta is listening. Turns out now they can read your brainwaves, but it's through this like massive device that could fit in a room like this and maybe fits the vibe. And it's called a Meg. What's a Meg?
It's not the Meg movie where that was like that giant...
The giant shark?
Yeah. But it is, I think, equally sizable in terms of how unscalable it is. But specifically on the timeline, I'm sure you saw this week, Meta's Fair Lab released something called Brain2 QWERTY. And what that is a system that can decode non-invasive brain recordings in real time. So a person wears the MEG scanner. This stands for, I'm going to butcher the pronunciation, but magnetoencephalography scanner. And what that is a helmet that can read magnetic fields that your neuron produces, and then it can reconstruct and type from brain signal alone. It actually hit a 61% average word accuracy and 78% for the best participant. So that's actually a massive jump. In prior non-invasive methods, that was only about roughly 8%. And they're framing this as a path to help millions of people with brain lesions who cannot communicate.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing technology. And I feel like there's so many people right now trying to communicate with AI by like whisper flowing quietly at their desk. Wouldn't it be nice to just talk with your mind to your chatbot?
I know. I think that is one of the visions. There's been a couple visions that play out in my head. Obviously, the very natural use case for this is people who need to turn brain activity into language. This would be highly useful to people who are currently using Neuralink, where it's very invasive. They have to drill a hole and then implant electrodes on your brain, or Synchron. They have to thread sensors through blood vessels. This is the most non-invasive system yet for those patients. At the same time, I think if even for second order effects, you could see how for regular users, it might be applied to wearables. It might be applied to ads even. We could chat a little bit about that. But I think the most immediate use case that they're at least pitching is the medical use case.
Yeah, I always think about like the dystopian sides of this, or like, who owns your thoughts? What's going to happen in this world when, computers are able to read our minds? Like, how much of what we give to technology is going to be like up for grabs, and is there going to be like policy around who owns your thoughts?
Regular consumers, there is a trade-off you're always willing to make for convenience.
Right. Are you going to let Meta read your brain?
If it means that you don't have to type anymore.
You don't have to type anymore.
Yeah, or if I just think something and it automatically surfaces the search that I would like. I mean, that is an interesting UI, UX
Right.
shift.
But if you were like thinking about this dress that you were going to buy and then all of a sudden you're getting served the dress.
That's kind of the ad vision. So a lot of people are skeptical of this. Obviously, I think there's a lot of well-intentioned impact that this can make in the medical space. And at the same time, I could see how Meta, being one of the biggest ad businesses in the world, could take those thoughts and infer signal around what you're interested in, even without you knowing, and then surface ads for you. When you combine things like wearables, which they're clearly building in with the Kylie Jenner glasses, with their existing interfaces across the web, WhatsApp, Instagram, Facebook, plus something like this, you can see how they pretty much have data points in every aspect of your life and really can just build a profile around you. And therefore, from an advertiser standpoint, that is some of the most valuable data out there.
It was pretty interesting that Meta open sourced this. Why did they do that? Is it because they've got the next version in closed, like ready to go? What's exciting there?
My sense is this in the short term and medium term will very much so be a medical endeavor. I think it's a long time.
It's pretty hardware heavy. Like that Meg is huge.
Yeah. So as much as there is criticism of Neuralink, Synchron, some of these more invasive procedures, Meg is also not scalable because it's really heavy. I think there are some stats here. Each scanner costs multiple millions. They require a magnetically shielded room, and a Meg scanner weighs apparently sometimes as much as a small car. So for any real world use case where Meta is maybe in a dystopian way tapping into our thoughts, you would really have to scale down those sensors. And I think as much as we as a society should prepare long-term about that slippery slope, I don't think we have to have, we don't have to be ringing the alarm bells tomorrow about Meta reading our brain.
I mean, if you think about how fast things are moving, if we go from this massive thing that's going to take up a space larger than this room to something like Kylie Jenner glasses, this could change the way people interact with technology.
Yeah, I think that's when this becomes dangerous, is when you actually infer neural signals that, you have a device that sits on your head. Right now, the sensors are really heavy. They exist in a Meg scanner. But if from a hardware standpoint, you can scale that down to a little sensor that sits on your Meta glasses, that's how Meta gets access to that data. But I will say there are some interesting regulatory responses that countries are having. For example, in 2021, Chile became the first country to introduce neural rights, so requiring special protection for brain activity. And this is even including raw brain data. And then France and Germany are actually also drafting laws to ban mandatory neurotech in employment contracts. So the idea that some of this technology could be applied to surveillance of their employees, reading attention, reading what you think about your employer, focus, fatigue even. This is moving quickly, but it's not coming tomorrow. And I'm intrigued to see both the regulatory responses and how it'll be actually applied in real life.
Yeah, I think for now I'd like to maintain my mental privacy, but I'm open to it down the line. Claire, Anthropic announced Claude Science. What is it, and what's the implications for the scientific industry?
Huge release on the timeline. I know we were riffing on it. In short, it's an AI workbench for scientists. They launched it in beta, and it integrates into these tools, databases, and packages that researchers often use. What's cool is that they also produce auditable artifacts after, and they also give these researchers access to compute. One of the big differences, and we'll, I'm sure, talk a lot about how Gemini and OpenAI are also tackling this space, but one of the big differences is that really the product innovation is at the product level as opposed to a new model. So it's not running on a new model. It's still the same Claude Opus 4.8 models or whatever Claude model you would like to use. There's no special access or any sort of gating.
And how is this different than, what OpenAI is doing with their proprietary models and maybe what DeepMind's doing with AlphaFold?
I would say Anthropic is really going after the workbench, if you will. So in the same way that I think actually Dario Amodei quite literally said that in the way that Claude Code upended programming, they want Claude Science to do the same for researchers in life sciences. So the magic isn't necessarily the one feature or really powerful model. It's that you've built a great product like Claude Code that plugs into the exact right sources, the right literature, the right data analysis, and you basically verticalize this and kind of connect all these disparate islands that researchers currently have to work through. I think just to kind of give you an example of what a researcher's life currently is like, they often have to manage between a couple hundreds of different tools. So in the entire workflow of a researcher, say they're researching why a cancer drug stops working in specific patients. In order to answer that one question, they have to go through PubMed for papers. They have multiple different data sets for data.
And then it seems like Claude Science has like over 60 of these built in, which is back to your point of like they're building for the workflow of scientists.
Exactly. So they're connecting all of these disparate workflows and disparate tools. I think if you go back to that workflow of a researcher, they're basically switching between data sets, code to analyze this data. They're using protein folding models. And I think one thing I've seen a lot of researchers be really excited about is that it solves for reproducibility. And so in particular, if you ask the model, or if you ask Claude Science to reproduce the problem, it will give you the entire chat history. It'll give you all the data it access. When I think in current reality, it seems that for the researcher community, there's a big issue because if you ask a researcher for the same thing, the way that they manually do it today, it's pretty hard to trace back the exact data sets, exact workflow that they use. So that I think is actually going to be a huge unlock for the scientific community.
How would a researcher who's using these applications think about Anthropic, OpenAI, and DeepMind differently?
I think, as I mentioned, Anthropic really innovating at the product level, basically building Claude Code, but for life sciences. I think OpenAI's innovation in this space has really been at the brain level. So they actually changed the model itself. So they launched something called GPT Rosalind, which is their first purpose-built science model. This launched in April 2026, named after Rosalind Franklin, whose X-ray work was pretty essential to this ecosystem. And it's a new model, so new brain built for biology, drug discovery, medicine. It's optimized for chemistry, protein engineering, and genomics. So compared to Anthropic, which is really just giving the exact same brain that we all have access to, Claude Opus 4.8, but just giving it better tools and connecting all those tools, OpenAI has actually just created a new brain itself. It's a specialist brain. So this brain is only built for this use case. And therefore, it is deliberately hard to access because if you have a model that's really good at biological reasoning, it's really great at drug discovery in good ways, but also could be misused.
Of course, there's some dangers.
Exactly. So that's why, even though OpenAI and Anthropic technically both have life sciences products out there, Anthropic's innovation is at the product level. They're not changing the brain. And so that's available to everyone versus OpenAI's, because it's tailored to this specific workflow. The brain is viewed as something that has to be gated for now. And then I think Google is an interesting player in this space. We've talked a lot about their innovations. I think last week we talked about John Jumper moving over from DeepMind. He was essential to AlphaFold, but they are the only one that owns the foundational science models. And they in that sense, they have a massive advantage that I would say OpenAI and Anthropic can't necessarily replicate very quickly. Specifically, I'm referencing AlphaFold, which is for protein structures, and their whole family of other models. They have Alpha Missense and Alpha Genome. These are for genetic mutations behind disease. They have something called Alpha Proteo, which is for novel protein binders. And if you look at something like an AlphaFold, that's already helped over 3 million researchers. Alpha Genome currently used by roughly 3,000 scientists. I would say that is Gemini's advantage here, but really they're all going after a very exciting space.
And it's moving so quickly. Do you think that Claude Science can do what they did with Claude Code and develop, the surface where the scientific community wants to work?
I think that's the hope. I myself have not tried Claude Science.
It's only in beta, just came out.
I think there's promise there. I think the Anthropic team is really savvy when it comes to product. And you see all three of them going after this space. And I will say there's a reason for it. It's, obviously I think all of these labs are excited about the vision of creating very real impact to people's lives and in medicine. But I also think there's a big buyer at the other end of it in pharma.
For sure. And as we've seen, the big model layer companies are going after these vertical applications, right? From coding to life sciences. Which one's next? Yet to see.
Pharma is a big one because I would say they are a super high margin buyer. I think with Claude Code or all of these coding and enterprise tools, naturally going after the world of knowledge work.
Yeah, and switching costs is very low. Their developers are apt to try new things. The scientific community, the lock-in is pretty heavy.
And specifically, I think if they nail this, they could co-develop drugs with pharma. So if you think about the current workflow for pharma, let's even, abstract away from the individual scientists to how the entire pharma industry works. Right now, a single new drug costs around $2.6 billion and takes 10 to 15 years. And up to 90% of candidates that enter any sort of trials fail. So that's a pretty abysmal rate. It's really expensive. We are just living in a very inefficient scientific drug discovery process. If you break that process down, a lot of time is spent on target identification and validation. A lot of time is spent on clinical trials, preclinical. And the most brutal part, as I mentioned, is that even by the time it reaches the market, a lot of these candidate drugs fail. So I do think things, whether it's Claude Science or GPT, Rosalind, they can tackle that front end. They can help with discovery. They can help with hit finding, lead optimization, predicting how it will play out in preclinical. And if you can help with that part, then hopefully at the front end, by the time you actually release a drug, you'll have a better hit rate. And so I think that's the flywheel they're going after, is really building efficiencies within the pharmaceutical industry. Our guest today is one of the most quietly influential people in computing. Ion Stoica is a Berkeley professor who has spent 25 years turning university research into infrastructure that the AI industry runs on. He co-founded Databricks, which is now valued at $130 billion, and Anyscale, and he's behind open source systems like Apache Spark and Ray, which is a framework that OpenAI used to train ChatGPT. He also co-founded and chairs Arena, which is the platform that began in his Berkeley lab as Chatbot Arena and became the most watched scoreboard in AI. Ion, welcome to Lightwork. We know that Arena started out as a research project out of Berkeley back in 2023. You're very well known for having spun 4 companies out of your Berkeley lab. And this fall, you're going back to teaching undergrad. A lot of people in your position by now may have even left the classroom decades ago. Curious what has brought you back to the operating seat?
Everything in my mind is about having a positive impact, right? By impact, what I mean here, doing something with that can make the life, at least of some people, better. Maybe building some tools, like software tools, which help people do their job faster and better. Maybe sometimes do things they couldn't do before. Providing a better, deeper understanding about what they are using and how they should use some of the tools the best way, like in the case of Arena. And I think that both when at university, in industry, it's about trying to maximize that impact. And obviously in academia, it's a lot of research, early days, trying to figure out better ways to do things, hopefully. And in some of these cases, some projects, in order to be able to maximize that impact, are turning into companies.
Maybe zooming back a little bit to even the Berkeley days, when did you realize this could be something big? And in particular, I'm curious what you saw in the two founders you decided to partner with.
So actually, this, probably, it started as a side project of another project we had. And that first project was very early days when Llama from Meta was released. A group of the students, my students, and in a weekend, took some data, which was pretty high quality data at that time, share GPT data, so people sharing their best conversation with GPT at that time. So again, this was the spring in 2023, and using that data to fine-tune, to improve the Llama model. And the resulting model was Vicuña. And then that model, we deploy it on the web and to like a chatbot. Right. So now the question is that you have that model, you believe that it's kind of better than the base Llama, but how do you show that it's better, right? And at that point, the way you are going to evaluate these models or this kind of static tests, right? You have a question answering, these kind of benchmarks, and these are obviously not capturing the real life interaction between the humans and these kind of large language models. And this is how Arena was born, trying to solve that problem and to evaluate that chatbot based on Vicuña, the model we released, and other models out there, right? And that's why the first iteration was this kind of what we called, this comparison we called battle mode, in which a user comes and asks questions, whatever questions they want, and they get answers from two randomized these large language models. And then at the end, the user can say, hey, I like these answers, or from this LLM, or from this other LLM, or maybe I don't like any of the answers, or both answers are great. And so that's kind of was born, the Arena was born. And for the longest time, actually, was more like, a measurement project and so forth. Didn't pay a lot of attention, but it started to get a lot of traction in the community. So now, even the large model providers using Arena to say, hey, I'm performing very well here. It's because it's kind of a unique evaluation using real users on real tasks. And then it's kind of snowball from there. And then obviously, even at that point, it was not clear there is a company. It was something very popular, people find useful and so forth. But it was very atypical kind of model, because at least for me, all the other companies I've been involved before, they are like, it's some open source software project which gets a lot of adoption, and there is a company started by students to take it to the next level, right? To support it, to reach more users and things like that. So, but as this grew, actually, Anastasia and Waylene got more and more excited. And then it was starting to be the question is that it was pretty costly to run it, right? So now what do you do, right? It's pretty costly to run because we have to actually pay for the access to these best models, right? Because the users, so this study provides the users free access to these best models and the ability to compare how these models are performing for their tasks. Okay, and it's critical. That point is critical because we want to maintain neutrality, right? If basically, some of these models providers gives us a lot of credits for free, then is going to be a bias there because we are going probably to use those models more because they are free. So that's kind of, and then the next step is what do we do about it, right? To take it to the next level because it's kind of growing leaps and bounds. And we look, for the longest time, we wanted to create a foundation or donate to a foundation. But when we look at the numbers, didn't add up, right? And then the decisions was to create a company because Arena was becoming such an important part of the ecosystem, an ecosystem which was growing very fast. And the capabilities of the models are evolving so fast that you always need kind of, it's very dynamic environment in which you need hopefully, like some organizations or some entity which is able to measure, capabilities of these models, and not only in abstract way, but our capabilities and reflected from the human perspective, right? How useful human finds using these models for their day-to-day tasks.
So Arena has become so integral to the workflows of everybody in AI. For someone who's maybe never used Arena, could we just take a little step back and could you explain to our audience, when someone goes to Arena and casts a vote, what does the platform do with that vote?
Our basic evaluation, like I mentioned, is based on the human votes. So humans are presented when they have a task to perform, when they ask questions. Arena provides two answers from two randomized LLMs. Now, you as a user, you can read the answers and decide which one is better. And you can vote, right? It's not mandatory to vote. If you choose not to vote, you don't vote. You don't vote. But many people will like to vote, to contribute. And then they say, okay, model is better, or that model is better, or was the same. Now, the way to think about what we do with these votes, think about the model is similar. That's why sometimes it's called ELO rating, like in chess, or in tennis. You have this kind of ranking, right? And these rankings are determined on the results of two players or playing with each other, and based on the result. Now, this result, it also depends, for instance, of the strength of the opponent. Right, so it's if you play with a strong opponent, you are going to get a bigger bump in the rating. With a weaker opponent, you smaller one. If you win, right, and the same if you lose, and that's kind of you aggregate all these kind of votes, and then you create a leaderboard, and we have this kind of number rating, again, very similar with ELO rating in chess or ATP rating in tennis. And I'm sure, many other sports have this kind of similar ratings.
I think what's so powerful about Arena is it drove this paradigm shift from, to your point, this idea that we had these sort of standardized tests for models, right? And now you have Arena. I'm curious, in the same way that you have human votes as a differentiator and as the edge here, is that ever to your disadvantage? Are you seeing any sort of vote rigging or manipulation? How do you even figure out the difference between, likability versus actual quality?
Yes, we are. There are two things to say here. So first of all, we do a lot of work to try to filter the low quality votes, to filter bots, so to speak. So we have many techniques to do so. And we have an entire team just focusing about the quality, data quality, and the integrity of the leaderboard. So we take that very seriously because it's a matter of trust. The other thing I want to mention is about there is two things. It's objectivity and subjectivity, right? With many of the tasks. Now, there are tasks like the math tasks or programming tasks, which they are very objective, right? You know that it's working or doesn't work. You get the correct answers. The program runs and give you the expected result. But there are also other tasks which are not are more subjective, right? So for instance, you ask the LLM to write a poem, and you get 2 poems, right? That's kind of more subjective, right? Because for good reasons, you and me can decide that a different poem is better than the other one. Right.
So how do you take some of those like subjective human votes and turn them into like an objective ranking?
Yes. So what we do, and you'll see more and more coming from us here, we try to disentangle what is kind of the subjective signals from or objective signals, right? So for instance, for the objective signals, you can check whether the result is correct or not. Right? But for the subjectives, then and the rest you disentangle, and the rest will be kind of subjective. But one point I want to make here, the subjectivity, like people say, is extremely important, right? In the kind of human communication, right? Because, for instance, when 2 people communicate, I can tell you the same information, but in one case can be, I don't know, boring and, like use many words all over the place. And in other case, it can be more, energetic, crisp, and things like that. The point is, I provide you the same information. So objectively, the 2 deliveries are should be the same. However, the kind of style and how I present it makes a huge difference in terms about what, the other person kind of understand and retains in terms of information. This is always the case, right? It's like when you write a column, it's the same thing. You know what information you want to provide, but how you do it is like matters. When you look at the presentations, it's the same thing. And I think that we want, and also model providers and application providers, they do want to understand how to deliver the information as the most effective way to humans. And this is, it's traditional. It's like UX for any other field, right? It's like, it's, user experience, right? With your fridge, with your TV and so forth. About capabilities are the same. So I just want to make the point here is that both matters, right? And we try, and you'll see more coming from us, to disentangle and tell you the factual, the correctness, and the other side, it's about the look, the stylistic, and both of them have impact.
It's so helpful that you laid this out, because I know that you all recently launched something called agent mode, which is almost taking this to a step further, yes. Right? You have, as you laid out, you have very binary answers in the field, but then agent mode is almost like an evolution of subjectivity plus objectivity. How do you even assess an agent's performance?
Yes, very happy you answered that question, because the way we evaluate agents is different from this kind of pairwise comparison. because the agents are far more complicated. And obviously, as you know, fundamentally what an agent is kind of an orchestrator large language models, which can interact with the environment. It's almost like giving the agent hands, right? To use tools, to use searches, browsers, call databases, and things like that. And then you have, of course, a harness which provides a memory, maintain state. And typically there are also multiple rounds, right? It's like, because you want to achieve a task, buy a sweater, a blue sweater, right? With, cotton, and I don't know, it's like you may have a price range, right? Or develop an entire system, right, to query data, right? So now, when in this kind of interaction between the large language models and the tools and this harness, there is a trace, right? And from giving the task to solve until you get an answer, which hopefully is the task being solved satisfactorily, okay? And in this trace, again, you have multiple interactions between the tools and the large language model and so forth. So we take this trace, and then now we kind of split it in this kind of interactions. And now the fact is that in the trace, there is a lot of signals, right? Because people, for instance, are going to say, this is good, this is bad, or there may be more subtle signals. Hey, do this again, or now let's go to the next step, okay? And which kind of, capture whether that the agent satisfies the user intent or not and needs to be corrected. And of course, there are more explicit signals like, oh, this task has completed, great job, right? Or no, it's, I'm giving up, you are clueless, right, as an agent. So we take that, and then we try to figure out a different combination, like this LLM with this kind of tools, or this LLM with this kind of harness. And based on the combinations on the signals, then we can come up. We are coming up. It's far more sophisticated. I think Anastasio can explain you even better about how this, using different models, or in the future different tools, explain those signals. So whether the agent has been successful or not, right? And this is, we just released the agentic mode, and we are very excited about that, because this is, again, one step for making AI far more useful. Of course, this means a lot of more complexity, and I think that, providing the insights about what matters and how it matters in accomplishing a task successful is very important. And I just want to point out that this is the first time an agent capabilities are evaluated using, again, real tasks from real users.
On Arena, you rank every major AI lab, OpenAI, Google, Anthropic, and at the same time, these are all potentially paying customers for Arena.
Yeah.
How do you guys stay neutral, and how do you stay seen as neutral?
Yeah, that's a great question. So first of all, the value we provide to these customers is that neutrality, is trust, right? If we wouldn't be trusted, then whatever signals we provide to them is not going to have the same kind of value, right? So I just wanted to point out that actually the incentive to be a trusted referee in the ecosystem is completely aligned to the value we provide to these customers. So the one thing also I wanted to say is that, why do you do evaluation at the end of the day? Why do you want to know which models and so forth perform better for what task, or is more cost effective? Because that's a bigger and bigger problem today, right? It's like you don't want to spend, like everyone now is raining on the costs, right, using these LLMs. Is because you want to build kind of better AI. By better AI, I means you want to build AI applications, maybe agentic applications, or even models which are reliable, right? It's like satisfy, align with the user intent, and are cost effective, right? That's kind of what it is. So that's kind of what we help our customers with, right? In the case of the model providers, we do help them to improve also their models. But yeah, it's like going back, I think that I just want to reemphasize the fact that us being trusted as our evaluation being trusted, it's absolutely aligned with the value. It's actually the value we provide to our customers.
You all play such an important role as a neutral third party. And it's very clear that the target can sometimes often be what people optimize for. You see this in humans in the way that they optimize for standardized tests. You see this for the labs as well. Do you think how we measure these systems will evolve? How do you make sure that you're picking the right measurements in the first place, especially when so much is at stake because you're driving the entire industry?
A great question. And it's again, like as a high level, we do drive the entire industry to benefit at the end of the day humans, right? So, we are very excited about this mission. The humans in our evaluation, as you can see, it's in the loop, right? We are talking about objective versus subjective and so forth. So we do believe this kind of human in the loop, and we want to incentivize the industry to benefit humans. Now, the question is about, well, you measure something then that is something, and people are going to try to adapt so that they are going to be higher on that, whatever, in that particular metric, on that kind of leaderboard. And it's true, but I think this is part of the incentivizing these LLMs, again, we see it to benefit humanity. But the other thing I want to point out here is that this is a dynamic system. It's not a fixed set of benchmarks. And we see a lot of new tasks. You cannot optimize. You can optimize maybe for the past task, but they are going to see newer and newer tasks. And because, we made a study at some point, and, maybe you shouldn't quote me on this, all the numbers, but remember that, for instance, you see in a day some kind of like almost 70% at that time of the prompts of the question from users you haven't seen in the last 3 months. Right? And there have been studies also at Google and so forth. You have always new queries. Why new queries and new prompts and new tasks? Well, because the world around you changes. So you are going to ask questions and things like that about what happened today, right? It's like the news and things like that. In this particular case, it's because every, every month, every few weeks, every week, you have a new model. The capabilities are advancing, so you can do more tasks and bigger and harder tasks than you could do before, right? So you cannot kind of overfit, so to speak, to arena, right? I think that's kind of a very important aspect, which it's a value we provide. It's live benchmarks, you have live testing. Everything changes every day.
You have such a unique window into this space. And as you mentioned, it's evolving on a daily basis. You all as a platform have to evolve with the capabilities. I guess the curious question for me is just, if you play this out and if we reach this promise of AGI and these systems being like humans, is there even a world where AI might not be measurable in the way that sometimes humans aren't measurable?
That's a great question. I think obviously, about AGI, I will not go into that because, he's such a ill-defined term, and you can talk with people around and say, some of them will say AGI has already arrived. And, but taking a step back, there is no question the capabilities of these models are growing leaps and bounds, right? And they are better and better, and for some tasks and better than humans. So here is all the discussion about whether AGI has happened or not. However, I just also to point out there is a part, like I told this, like about, like I mentioned earlier, about things which are not measurable, right? Which, let me ask, let me, give this example. I give you earlier on is the poems, but maybe a better one is music, right? It's like people have such different tastes about the music, right? And it's totally a subjective one, right? So a smart LLM, I don't know, it's like maybe can guess what I would like, but it's not only one answer, right? And that's down also to the human taste, human preference, right? And that will remain for a long while. And the other thing, like I wanted to mention, is like it's still even today and I think in the foreseeable future, the humans are part of the loop. Think about the most successful AI applications today. Coding. It's a developer, it's in the loop, right? Customer support and things like that. It's kind of to satisfy kind of the human and answer human questions, right? So always about you want to measure and to understand what is the most effective way of humans to interact with AI, right? Which brings us to the same point about how you are going to design this kind of AI systems to benefit humans, right? Because they are ultimately the consumer. So yes, I do believe that for the foreseeable future, despite the fact that these models are going to become more and more powerful, the human signals are going to be very important, if not even more important. The last thing I want to mention, of course, if these LLMs are going to become more powerful, we are going to use them as part of the evaluation, right? You hear a lot about this kind of, LLM as a judge, right? Using large language models to judge, instead of a human. It's actually, we wrote a paper actually very early on when Arena started about that. So in some sense, at least, we are the ones to introduce these concepts early on, right? So we had both these kind of LLMs very early on judging and also human judging. And in that paper, we actually compare how good and what is the agreement between them and things like that.
All right, and let's talk a little bit about the business. We've talked a lot about the product. Certainly, you guys announced this week that you crossed $100 million in annualized revenue in just 8 months after launching your product. Who's paying for it, and what are they actually buying?
Great question. So at the high level, it's like our goal is to help developer and organization to build better AI, right? Which serves humans better. And by better, like I mentioned, is like one is reliability. Reliability means that the AI provides answers which are in line with the user's intent and expectations. And the other things is like, give you the results in the most cost-efficient way, okay? Or maybe someone gives you faster, right? It's like, so this is kind of what we are about. And and of course, in order to do that, you need trustful, high-quality evaluations, right? Because you have many choices, which choice you are going to choose to select for your application. Now, the first step in this journey, it's about helping model providers to evaluate their models and to help them improve, right? So what we sell to our customers, in this case, model providers, it's evaluations, right? The basic evaluations means that, like they can provide, so how this happens. They can provide a checkpoint, a model they want to evaluate. And then we put it on Arena under an anonymized, right? It's anonymized. And the users will vote in some of these tasks. We are going to select that model we want to evaluate. And after a certain number of votes, we are going you can provide to the model providers, hey, this model here is how is ranking at this, on these categories and so forth, and overall rating and so forth. And then we also provide, some data to help them understand why it's performing the way it's performing. Okay, so that's kind of we provide. That's kind of our basic product, and obviously now we are going to sell evaluation for agents, and then we have also ability to use our data to route to the best model for your prompt and for your tasks. It's actually already available, and this actually it's a product we just provide for free to our users.
Something I keep going back to is, when I had that conversation with Anastasios, he mentioned this idea that if you're going to climb a hill, you better be climbing the right one, and you all are determining what that hill is. And what's so great about this conversation is it keeps reminding me that you all are putting humans at the center. We're creating these hills that are human-centric.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that a company like that exists in the ecosystem in a world where we constantly talk so much about automation, AGI, however you define it. You are interfacing with a lot of young, bright humans in the classroom. It seems like you have a constant desire to return there. I'm curious with your time in these classrooms with these bright people shaping the future, what are they spending time on? What do you hope some of them build in the next couple decades?
It's, great question. So there are a few things. So one thing that's excited for me is this kind of concept of reliability. Is that about, is a task, is the agent doing whatever is doing is aligned with the user intent? And this is very hard because many times, you specify something, you say, I want X, but you have so much context, you don't rely to the model, right? So it's again, I want to help me to buy a blue sweater or a sweater. But maybe there are so many things you haven't said. We just didn't realize that the agent misses the context. Maybe, what it's made of. Of course, you need to specify the size. Maybe you have a particular type pattern, like micro pattern you like and so forth. So I think that's kind of things about how you have the agent and AI satisfy and being aligned with the user intent. I think it's very important, and it's going to be more and more and more important. Related with this is about, we need to understand how the agent fails when it doesn't do it. When it doesn't, we call it this kind of terms, hallucination and so forth, but it's much more subtle than that, right? So I see, because at the end of the day, it's like all this AI will be successful if it's serves the human in a better way, right? It's like makes people more productive, makes people happier, right? So I think, giving them more time to do things what they like, for instance, right? So I think that's why this reliability and kind of the trust that the agent is going to do what I want to do, I think it's very important, it's very exciting. On a shorter term, obviously, there is this kind of concept, it's very expensive, right? So how can you get that value in the most effective way? And this is true for anything we need, right? It's like, how do, you buy a TV, a car, right? You always look at these trade-offs. And I think that you don't need to always use the most powerful model, right? If I want to do a simple addition or some kind of simple math, almost all the models are doing that now correctly, right? So you can use the cheapest. That's why, for instance, what I mentioned to you, this kind of intelligent router we call Max, is trying to figure out, based on your task, which model is going to be good enough to correctly and solve that task. But yeah, these are the few things which I am very excited about.
Yeah, what I keep coming back to is whether it's reliability or this trade-off between performance versus cost versus latency. These are all things you can't solve unless you get measurement right. And we're just really excited that you, Anastasio, Swalen are working on this problem for the industry.
Happy you can contribute.
Thank you for joining us on Lightwork.
Thank you so much.
Who's guarding the AI agents? Lightspeed-backed Straiker. They just raised a $64 million Series A, about $85 million in total funding. Straiker is an agentic security company. It finds the AI agents running inside a business and tests them for weaknesses before they go live, and monitors them once they're working. It matters because as companies hand agents access to real systems, the old rule-based security tools were never built to watch software that makes its own decisions.
And then there's Pie out of New York. They raised a $19.5 million Series A, bringing their total funding to about $24 million. The founders are former Square and Toast operators, and they help small businesses with 3 core products. First, AI search, which helps them show up in ChatGPT or Perplexity. Think GEO or AEO for the little guy. They help with growth and customer acquisition, and they also have an AI receptionist front desk. The big vision is to become the infra layer that every small business runs on.